Hi there, welcome to the Pruscott podcast. My name is Megan Prusco. I'm a residential and multifamily realtor here in Edmonton, Alberta. Today we are interviewing Ben Boileau, and he is the owner of the Chi Group, Care Home Investments Group. Care homes are a subsection of multifamily real estate that includes retirement housing, long-term care, assisted living, group homes, even orphanages. There is such a demand for housing like this here in Canada. It's incredibly lucrative. And not only that, you can feel really good about the money that you're making because when these businesses are run right, it really makes an impact on our loved ones that go to these facilities, the longevity of their life, the quality of their life. And man, it's just such a cool topic. What Ben does is he acquires the existing assets and then he optimizes them on the business side of things on what can make it more profitable than it currently is, and then return those profits in the form of value to the residents. So neat. We haven't talked about anything like this on the podcast so far. If you have any questions for Ben or I, then drop it in the comments down below. If you like this content, then please actually like it and subscribe. It goes a super long way. I hope you enjoy the conversation just as much as I did. Welcome, Ben, to the Pruscott podcast. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Oh, thank you for having me too. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, we were chatting a little bit right before we started recording, and on most of the episodes that I do, I actually know most of the information that I'm asking about. I'm just regurgitating it for the audience, but for this episode, I'm flying blind. I don't know much about your industry. I find it very fascinating and interesting, but I'm not very educated in it. This is all going to be brand new, fresh information for me.
Oh, no, absolutely love to share. I can definitely dig into, I guess, the premise of what it is that we do and maybe some details of where it's important. But also, I want to thank you as well because you share a lot of knowledge and you articulate things very well in your podcast. Happy to be a part of that equation. And for all the rest of your listeners as well that are interested in learning more about multifamily real estate, hopefully that this will be an interesting part for them too.
Oh, this is going to be great. Yeah, Ben and I met because we were at a real estate networking event called Wealth Genius Expand here in Edmonton, Alberta. And I was just about to walk out the door. I was like, okay, I'm exhausted. It's time to leave now. And then, Ben, you just pierced me with your eyes and you're like, hey, and you struck up a conversation and introduced yourself. I was like, oh, this is actually really cool. You got to be on my podcast. And now we're here. We made it happen. We booked a time.
Yeah, you are.
We'll start breaking into it. At a high level, what is it that you do?
Sure. Just like typical multifamily, there are various stages of, let's say, there's acquisitions, there's development, and many other different types of real estate transactions in between. All right, so this is a sector of multifamily care homes, but there's a couple other important points to it. So what I do is I acquire existing cash flowing care homes, businesses that are run well by individuals that have probably often have owned it for 10, sometimes even 15, 20 years. And then I optimize them by improving the processes, setting up new processes for them, often digitizing a lot of things, reducing waste. Because a lot of businesses with older management practices, they may not have a lot of the industry leading practices that you would have in larger corporations. And that's where my proficiency comes in, as I've been leading organizational change and Lean Six Sigma transformations and digital transformations, AI in larger companies, Fortune 500s. So really when I decided to take this leap into my own endeavor, some of it was personally driven, some of it was, of course, where I see an opportunity for adding significant value. But the core of my business is that right now we acquire, we optimize, and then we expand. So very similar to a lot of multifamily investors, how that's done can be a little bit different because we have a couple extra levers to play with.
Yeah, that's something that you mentioned when we first met. Like when you buy a typical value add multifamily, so just a normal apartment building, the only thing you can really play with are the rent rates and the physical aspects of the building. So the value add opportunity renovations. And then when you renovate, then you can up the rent, or maybe you had a long-term owner beforehand, original owner, and they never really raised the rent that much. So you don't have to renovate, you can just lift the rents. But that's what you're stuck with unless you demo it completely and do an infill, which a lot of the times people aren't ready to do that. But you were mentioning different levers you can play with to optimize the financials of the investment. So, what are those levers that you can play with in care homes that you can't in traditional multifamily?
That's a great question. The first thing to realize is in multifamily, your expense ratios are typically going to be like 20-30% of your revenue. In care homes, it's more like 60-70%. So there's a much larger portion of the revenue which is taken up by expenses. The reason is we have 24/7 staff. We provide food. We provide a regular cleaning for all of the residents. We provide, let's say, events and different pieces. We have higher insurance costs in some cases. And so these are still very high cash flowing businesses, but just have a much higher expense ratio. Typically, when you go into a business and you analyze their expense statements, you can always find opportunity for improvement. And continuous improvement is what I've been doing for the past 10 years. Let's say, as an example, shift changes. The facility that I took over in 2023, they had staff that were taking time off erratically, not on any sort of a schedule. They didn't communicate when they were going to take a day off. And so, unfortunately, what that meant is that the owner had to backfill that day with an employee at 1.5 times the rate. And so he was living with a much higher expense ratio for staff than he needed to. And so just by having a better practice around how people communicate when they're available to work and what days they're going to have off, we managed to reduce that expense ratio for a building that about half of the total expenses were staffing. We managed to reduce that by about 15% just by having a better management practice. So
So
if
you reduced the staffing expense by 50%
15,
because of, sorry, 15. I was like, 50,
yeah,
that's insane.
that would be something.
15%.
Yeah,
And all you did was originally what would happen is they would sporadically ask for time off. And since they didn't have that scheduled properly, they'd have to pay another employee time and a half, so overtime. And then
right.
that's obviously coming out of the owner's pocket. Whereas if you just properly systemize when days are off and what the schedule is, you don't have to pay out of pocket for that overtime because it's just scheduled properly in the first place.
Exact. It's one
So
example of
cool.
many things. And it's great because what that does is it increases your NOI or EBITDA, which is what we refer to in business as the more or
Can
less
you explain what that is again?
no problems. NOI, which most multifamily investors are familiar with, net operating income. When we are taking a look at the care home realm in most businesses, we use the term EBITDA, which is earning before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. All it is essentially net income. We do talk about depreciation, as depreciation is a more important variable in businesses than they are in multifamily. Depreciation is still a variable in multifamily, but because it's a lower variable, we don't often consider it in our calculations. But yeah, EBITDA is really, you can think of it as NOI. It just has another layer of detail where we're taking into account the net income before debt service or before mortgage, before taxes, and before depreciation.
How the heck did you end up in this super niche industry? What is your career story?
Okay. I've been a multifamily investor since 2019. I've been a real estate investor or active in real estate since I started my property management company in the last year of university. So I was like, I don't know, say 20, help me out here, Ben, 2013, 2011, something like that. It's been a little while. And I've always been interested in business and optimization, right? So I graduated chemical engineering. I began applying my skills in businesses, and that's how I fell into Lean Six Sigma. And so I've had these two careers going on for the longest time. One in real estate, where I've been building a portfolio out, and then one in engineering and process improvement, like business optimization. I realized that I really wanted to combine them at one point, but I ended up identifying in one of the markets I was investing in this group home that was on the market, and its fundamentals looked frankly quite amazing compared to the other multifamily that I was acquiring in the area. It was like for a facility that was listed at sub a million, they were doing over 300,000 in revenue. And it was like, didn't make sense. So I was like, okay, so let's learn what this is. At the same time, too, a little bit of the personal journey. My brother was actually, he's as a resident of one of these facilities. And I wanted to get a closer look under the hood and to understand how it works. Also, I was looking at it and it's like, okay, so obviously there's some financial basis for this as well. Let's take a look and understand this a little bit better. So part of it was personal interest, part of it was I was in acquisition mode for another multifamily. And it all just came together with the right partner. I'm partnered with a physician, fantastic guy who's a really great friend of mine. And we decided that this was something that we wanted to take on, see if we could make a success of this, and also if there was a way that I could create a safe space for my family. After a year of running this, it's been my best performing asset, and what we've been able to do to improve not just the business case, but patient quality, patient safety. It's just been substantial. Like we over a year without having to add any extra beds or anything, we've increased the valuation by 27%. And that's just by,
Congratulations. On your first try on one of these kinds of buildings?
yeah.
That is fantastic.
And it was a great business too. A lot of respect for the owner. He was an excellent operator. But some of the things that he was doing, like he was handing out checks manually, like printing them off and handing them out to each of his employees. He was doing individual runs to the grocery store. And then he had every time something would break, it would be a question of who would be fixing it. And so sometimes things would take a little bit longer. And so there were practices and there were just principles as I'm looking at this. It's okay, mom and pop kind of smaller business mentality, but most of the time I've been working in large corporate. And so large corporate kind of has these things figured out,
As you're
right?
talking about these like small efficiency deficiencies, I guess I could call them,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of like death by a thousand cuts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very good analogy. The great thing about it, though, and this is where it's quite amazing, is that even though things are running at, let's say, this level of efficiency, these buildings are still cash flowing better than typical multifamily. And I am a cash flow investor, so my philosophy of investing is that intrinsic value is directly proportional to cash flow returned adjusted for risk. For me, cash flow provides me with stability during times when interest rates may go up or down, when other expenses may impact your returns. I like those things to be predictable and stable so that I can pay more attention to the operations and the acquisition of new operations and worry less about things that I can't control. So it makes sense from that perspective for the type of investor I am as well.
I think this specific industry is really unique because while on the business side of things, it can be very lucrative and cash flow positive, and that's fantastic. That's what you want in an investment. But there does need to be any housing provider, but especially when you're talking or providing for minorities such as seniors or people that would be living in group homes, there does need to be a level of compassion beyond just having a typical tenant living in your basement suite. Do you have a story of one of your residents or maybe a business partner that you were able to help, or just like a story that you have with them that really stuck with you and reminded you of this is why I'm in this business?
Yeah, I have a few. I like to refer to Maslow's hierarchy of needs whenever I talk about care. The idea behind Maslow's hierarchy of needs is at the very base level, we all need food, shelter, medicine, if necessary, safe environment. And without those things, we spiral. We can be in actual danger. But those aren't enough to improve livelihood, if you provide people with just the basics, like the very base level,
They're just
then
surviving.
you're just surviving,
Yep.
right? Somebody who's in a prison cell can still have those things and they're still just surviving, right? It's not. And one of the things that our mandate really is to help people to build sustainable, let's say, endeavors and motivations in their life in order for them to reach the higher levels of that hierarchy. In the United States, they have a lot more programs to provide safe spaces for individuals, whether they're vulnerable or whether they have mental health challenges or whether they're elder, in order to get them involved in something that is connected to the community, where people can actually collaborate and work with other people that have value. Where I found in Canada that was lacking is like basically we're providing the base level of services. In order to improve that, to take a little bit from the US model, the first thing we need to understand is what the clients actually want. What are their desires? What is it that they actually need? And I know it sounds like it should be basic, but asking your customers, your clients, what they would like, what motivates them, what their interests are, is something that a lot of facilities like they treat it as an in and out. They don't often get the chance to incorporate that perspective. I think there's some reasons for that. I know that when facilities are maybe they're running tighter or they're doing a lot of work, maybe that doesn't cross their mind. But as we can increase the efficiency and reduce the time required to manage these operations, we create to be able to space to be able to do that. And so at Thunder Bay, as an example, one of the things that we found was that there were a lot of individuals, there was about 4 individuals that were actually interested in maintaining a garden, right? So we set up a space, we tilled the soil, and now there's fully functioning gardening. It produces herbs, it produces flowers and peppers. And they're engaged in it. It's something, it gives them something to do that actually
You're
produces
not
animals. It's
spending
like,
like tens of thousands of dollars on this.
no, you don't need to. That's the thing. Another example is workout equipment, right?
Hmm.
I'm a big believer in physical health for mental health and for longevity. I think that one of the most important things when it comes to senior health is being healthy and active. And gym equipment doesn't cost a lot. And when you ask people, is hey, if this was here, would you use it? That that changes the conversation. All of a sudden, you can build in programs, you can build in regimes, you can encourage people to use these facilities that actually have a direct impact on their health. And so that's something else that we did as well.
Have you
We
gotten feedback from some of these revisions that you've done from your residents saying, "Oh, I love this garden," or have you like seen anything to prove that it was worth it?
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's been pictures, and my staff, they provide me with the regular reports. Of course, there's the times that I've visited, which has been great as well. And yeah, it's while we typically hear when those things that are provided are not working, that's what we hear more often. Once
Yeah,
they're
of
there and it's
course.
working, it's great.
Yeah.
When it's not working, it's hey, what's going on? At the same time, the initial hey, this is amazing. That's when we really start to feel the results of our impact.
Yeah, that must be rewarding in a couple different ways as an investor to hear that from the people that are ultimately supporting your business and the ones that are making it profitable are thanking you for that. That must feel really good. You were
Yeah.
talking about having more of these kinds of facilities in the States, and that's actually, I've been thinking about long-term care facilities for a couple of years now. My husband and I flew down to Arizona to see my grandparents. They're snowbirds. And they showed me where they used to live. So it wasn't long-term care, it was just independent living. And they had
Yeah.
this really fancy one that they showed us, just like crazy fancy. I don't understand how. But then they downsized and went to a trailer park version, but it was still like a beautiful trailer park. They had like, 2 community halls where every Friday they found something to throw a party about, whether someone was moving in, moving out, birthday, granddaughter's birthday. Like the culture is very lively. They had 2 jacuzzis and a pool there. I'm like, how is this a trailer park?
That
Everybody has
sounds
golf carts.
like a
It's,
good
it's just
place
like
to
a
be.
closed community, right? They had like
Yeah.
oranges and lemons growing on the trees outside of their trailers. I'm like, wow. And then they're in Hinton. That's where they live when they're up in Canada here. And in Hinton, they just built a seniors facility that's for rent. And 2 years before it was finished, it was fully leased.
Yeah.
And I took a quick look inside. Obviously, I only saw the common area, but it looked very beautiful. And my grandpa was saying like how lucrative it could be. And I was thinking just exactly what you were saying. We don't really have anything like that in Canada, like almost like a resort.
Yeah, there are some very forward-thinking individuals that I'm very proud to be aligned with that are taking that challenge on. There's one individual, he's building a number of facilities out in Kelowna, BC. Excellent designs, really exciting because they're borrowing a lot of models of aging in place where people have everything that they need and they don't need to move in order to get a different level of service. Really happy by some of those more recent improvements that we're seeing. But what's really important here is that the gap between the demand and what we are right now filling is it's very wide. As an example, it over the next 10 years, it's predicted we're going to be needing about 200,000 beds and units, whether that's between retirement, assisted living, and long-term care. Over the past decade, we've built 73,000. So our rate it needs to increase by a factor of three in order to be able to keep up with demand.
And
And
it's no
now,
secret, everybody's talking about how the boomers are retiring now, and that's going to potentially screw with our CPP, and then also the housing. It's really getting rough for housing, and even the
yeah,
stock market people are talking about, but and businesses, a lot of boomers are trying to sell their businesses, and eventually they're going to need somewhere to live. Not everybody wants their mom and dad or grandma and grandpa to live with them.
that's an important piece of it. Definitely, I'm a family oriented person, and regardless of your choices, it's everybody wants to be closer to family. The challenge is, of course, providing aging in place services that you need for family when they require, let's say, mobility assistance or when they require more intensive medical care. It becomes a little challenging for certainly for most families in the middle income bracket to be able to afford a full-time nurse to be able to provide that level of care.
And on
That's like
the
full
flip side, because we're
salary.
talking from the perspective of the younger generation, but I imagine there's a lot of people in the older generation that feel some kind of embarrassment on needing that kind of assistance, and they would rather be self-sufficient or independent and have the kids come visit, but live on their own and not have to rely on the younger generation to support them.
That's a very important piece of it. And I think definitely we need to consider the stigma around it and how we can help to recognize that this is aging with dignity, right? And need to
Mm.
provide people an understanding. Look, and so we all need help at different stages of our life for different things. What we want to be able to do is minimize the interruption to your life. And that's why I believe very strongly in these aging in place communities where people can have a normal lifestyle and they don't need to move every time their service level increases because unfortunately a lot of facilities are right now designed to be like that where as soon as your needs go higher you're
Yep.
splitting up a spouse and like two people and one is going to a facility in a different city potentially while the other is does not need that level of service and so they're being serviced here and things like
Never
that.
even thought about that, but you're totally right. There's like different stages of like how much help you need as you age, and you're absolutely right. A lot of different housing providers are like, I'm only helping people that need this kind of help. I can only
Right.
house people that need this kind of help. So imagine being a senior, already super stressed, moving into this long-term care facility or retirement facility, and then you have to pack up and move again, and then pack up and move again.
Yeah.
And usually, as you need more and more help, well, it's getting harder. And then you're adding that. I think moving was like one of the top three stresses in life, I do believe, let alone
Yeah.
doing that when you're up there in years and then you feel a little bit embarrassed, maybe. And just that's a lot to handle.
That's the truth of it. And
Hmm.
it's incredibly impacting and it's very difficult for people that for anybody that is having to do so because of something that they have to admit that they need.
And then
Um,
the family members typically will have to like help grandma or grandpa make that arrangement. So it's even more work for the family members too. And with this aging in place, what ages does that typically assist, and what does that actually look like?
There's different models. The thing to think about when we're talking about retirement is often as much of a lifestyle, or it can be considered like more community based. It can be even considered more luxury based.
Mm.
And so the degree at which, let's say, we're in community to luxury affects the age where people are coming in. As you mentioned, a resort style type living where you have a lot of people that you can make friends with that are also retired. That's attractive to a lot of people. In some cases, these start at age 65 and upwards, of course, to the very end where there's long-term care and end-of-life support. And that would be the services that are offered within that encased community. But one of the things that I'm really excited about is on the, let's say, the retirement side, like the first part of that journey. There's a lot of things that we can do in order to keep people healthier longer. And those, there are a number of nutritional consultants, there are physical health consultants. There are things that we can build in order to help people live longer, healthier lives that instead of providing, as I was saying before, the very base level of service, food, housing, and whatever basic medical services are required, we can really have an impact on people by providing them with the type of support and the type of, let's say, supported, motivated activities, encouraging them to develop lifestyles that prevent a lot of the challenges that we see in the late 70s.
That is so cool to me because I think a lot of people, if they don't know about the industry, just like myself, they'd think, I don't really care, just show me what the profit looks like. But the fact that you're not just chasing the profit, even though, it does well, is you're making decisions not just based on like where can I cut costs, but like how is this actually going to impact my clientele in the long term? And for you to actually be able to market that, like even just on the nutrition side, we specifically choose these meals and mix them up so they don't get sick of them and they meet these requirements and go above this. And this is how we're not this we're helping grandma and grandpa beyond day to day. We're thinking of them year to year. How is this going to impact them? I think that
Yes.
really shows that not only are you very smart, but you're just a good person for actually going that extra layer deep. Very cool.
It's first of all, we all are part of the same population. We all have parents, or God bless those that don't have them with them, but we all, very common for us, right? And so we can all relate. I can think of my parents, of course, who I'm so thankful that they are taking on a lot of great practices that are extending their life. My father, bless him, he's 79. He's doing walks every day. He takes nutrition very seriously, and he's going to be in great shape for years to come. I also have family that passed earlier than others who didn't have some of those practices. Like my grandfather, unfortunately, and he was a great athlete. He was Mr. Jamaica bodybuilder, but he passed in his early 80s because there were he was sedentary for a good 20 years. And as things got harder, he didn't adopt a lot of the practices that would have been able to extend his life. So there's a big difference. And we're talking about like a difference of 20 years potentially when things are being done. And I'm sure you feel the same way about your family, that you love them and you want to be able to extend it for them. This is the important thing is this isn't a unique journey. This isn't a niche. Like we're not dealing with a small section of the population that only some people can develop empathy
Age.
for.
Yeah.
This is something that whether it's your parents, your grandparents, yourself, we're all going to go through this. And if we don't fix this challenge for our parents, we're likely not fixing it for ourselves either. So even at that level, we have an incentive in order to improve the landscape. But back to the business part, because I do believe that providing a better service, especially in customer facing type businesses, that providing a better services means a healthier business. It's probably more so in this segment than typical in multifamily, which is not that you want to be a good landlord, you want to provide a good environment, but because the touch is higher, the value that you get out of good quality service is much greater. And if you take a look at any customer centric organizations around the world where that becomes important, they typically do better too. But the difference is for us, where I see the opportunity is that as we can improve the efficiency of the businesses, as we can automate more routine tasks, and as we can reduce the expense margin, we create more time and more resources in order to improve quality as well. And as a result of improved quality, you have not only much happier clients, but yeah, on the business side too, you have more demand.
Yeah,
So it all
absolutely.
plays into each other. There's no reason why we can't run a really good business that really helps people and is
Yeah, you
also
can be
profitable.
profitable without taking advantage of people. Absolutely, you can. Yeah,
Yeah, it
that's
all works together. It's and I like to call our investors impact investors, right? People who are investing with a purpose and an intention. I mean, I really think that this is one of those real win opportunities where we can win for ourselves in business, we can win for our clients, and then we can win for our investors.
I really like that you said that like a triple win, and that's how I feel like me fully understanding money, and I'm sure I'm still have a ton to learn, but it's really cool as a realtor in real estate. You originally think only the seller's winning and the buyer's losing. You think it's a sum zero game, but when somebody buys a property, the seller's winning because they get to cash out. The buyer's winning because they're trading their money for value, in this case, a home or a property. The realtors are winning. We're getting commission checks. The mortgage broker is winning because he's getting a percentage of the loan. The lawyers are winning. Like it's it's only one
Right.
chunk of money that moves, and how many people win from it? That is so cool.
Yeah, no, you're right about that too, because in the essence, when a person needs an asset, depending on where they are in their life, it just changes the utility of it. So
Mm.
a person that is ready to sell, you're helping them either, like in my case, for example, maybe I'm acquiring larger buildings, or you're looking to retire. And so that building's utility means different for you at where you are in your life compared to somebody else that's acquiring it. You're right. It's not a zero sum game at all.
Yeah. And that the most successful deals are the ones where everybody feels like, yes.
Yes.
And I think no matter what scale of business you're in, you felt something like that, where it wasn't I won because you lost. It's like we both won and this is amazing. Something I did want to ask is you were mentioning that on average, these facilities do have higher expenses than traditional multifamily. So my brain automatically goes to that means it's more expensive, which means it's not as profitable. So why is this a good idea? I doubt that's right, but can you explain why I'm wrong?
No, that's a very good question. The very basics of care homes is that they are more efficient from a square foot perspective than typical multifamily. So
Why is
in
that?
so it, when we talk in multifamily, we talk in doors, right? Each door is going to be, let's say, 700 square feet. You got a kitchen and you got a bathroom. In care home facilities, the emphasis is on providing, of course, a space where somebody they sleep, they have their privacy, but most of the other aspects of their life is much more communal. So we have communal living rooms, we have kitchens that provide food to everybody. We have, in many cases, shared bathrooms.
Kind of like
And so
boarding houses, exactly like that.
yeah, it's very much like that, depending, of course, on where a person is. Like, I mean, some facilities, like retirement, is designed slightly different from assisted or long-term care, where in long-term care, there really isn't a need for, let's say, independent bathrooms. The savings in this case, if you think about it, is for the space that you require for a door, which really is a bed, you need a seventh of the total space. Maybe you need 150 square feet per bed. Each bed is bringing in equivalent and sometimes even more than you would typically get for rent for an apartment building. So per
So
square foot,
in that scenario, you're saying this hypothetical building, the unit is just basically a bedroom, right? Is that what you're
the
saying?
correct, yeah. So
Okay.
the actual unit in that case, or even in the case of, and again, retirement is slightly different from assisted or long-term care.
Yep.
But even in the case of retirement, typically the units are much smaller than you would have in a typical apartment building. And especially when you get into the need-based services like assisted long-term care, there's no reason for a 750 square foot apartment in those cases because a lot of the activities and services and things that are provided are much more communal.
I think
So,
you could argue that's actually a way to force the residents to interact with each other because there's nothing in their room. Whereas depressed teenagers, they have their desk in their room and their bed in their room and their cell phones, and they don't have to leave their room. They feel like they have everything there. But if in the retirement stage, there's nothing in your room but a bed, that does force you to go out and socialize, which undoubtedly helps your health out.
yeah, so that's actually it's a very important point because it's very important to be social. There's a lot of reasons, even from a safety perspective, why you don't want vulnerable people to be trapped in the room, whether it's with a heated appliances or where somebody won't hear them. So the emphasis when we get to senior care is typically much more communal, exactly for the reasons you mentioned. And obviously the benefit to that is creating more of a social net for individuals as well, who coming from the communities where people are not retired, where people are at work 8, 10, 12 hours a day sometimes. And then they come to a place where they're able to meet people throughout all hours of the day. It changes the equation. And so it changes the need for individual space. And as a result, you are providing these services, but and there is obviously a cost margin, but the difference is, let's say if you take the revenue over the course of 700 square feet versus the revenue over 100 square feet, means that your efficiency per square foot is a factor of 7 higher potentially. And then, yes, you have a higher expense ratio, which is to maybe 3 times higher. It's your 3 times higher expense ratio versus your 7 times more efficient cost. And so
Yep.
it typically speaking, we purchase at cap rates between 8 to 12%.
Wow. So
Yeah,
just for reference, a typical legacy building in a decent area, a typical multifamily legacy one, like we're seeing cap rates, I'd say the medium is like 5.5, so like anywhere between 4 and 6%. You were saying
yeah,
8 to 12%?
yeah. I personally look for 11% and above.
Something else you were mentioning about, I was thinking about the maintenance side of things, and then you mentioned appliances. Like appliances alone per unit, last I looked, I think altogether it's roughly 6 grand, really roughly. So imagine 6 grand times how many units, that alone. But what I was thinking more in the long run is the maintenance. If each unit doesn't have a bathroom, that's, I don't know, let's say it's a 60 unit building. That's 60 taps that you
Yes,
don't have to go and change out the faucets eventually, or maintenance calls, or you were talking about the health risks, but also the maintenance risk of somebody leaving those taps on, or the toilets flooding. Like the maintenance is like greatly shrunk because rather than having them in each individual unit, you have a cluster of them in one single space that have staff that are going through and monitoring often.
exactly.
That's brilliant.
There's actually an additional benefit to that too, and you hit it right on the head. So in our facilities, we have 24/7 staffing, and we typically employ cleaners that go through everything. So my staff are always aware whenever something is not working correctly, thereby allowing me to fix it before it becomes a bigger problem. Our management costs are probably more efficient, but even if they're not more efficient, they provide better service overall because as soon as something goes wrong, it gets fixed. To your point, obviously in the overall acquisition cost and whether it's development cost or just a general acquisition cost, there are savings from a capital perspective on yes, appliances when they have to be retired or have to be upgraded or plumbing, all the plumbing required to go to individual
Everyone's worst nightmare is
residences.
water, and you just eliminated how many sources of water?
Yeah,
That's amazing.
you're right about that too. Yeah. So there are a lot of different reasons why these buildings are more efficient from a total capitalization perspective. And a lot of people say that the gains in real estate are made on equity growth, which I'm not discounting that they are. We still have value add opportunities, but cash flow becomes a real measure, a method for return of capital as well. Like cash on cash returns, it can be 15%, 20% because we are essentially operating at higher caps and we're able to get better control of expenses.
And now my brain's going, if this can be so lucrative, then why are the masses of investors overlooking this sector of real estate? Why hasn't this become popular yet?
The same way I think that multifamily real estate and absolutely tremendous respect to the industry as well. It went through a phase of democratization too, where traditionally the primary investors were larger entities. And multifamily has gone through that phase, and now the opportunities that were originally only afforded to larger corporate interests now are available to you, me, those that don't have $10 million in their immediate checking
The
account.
MLI Select program was just gasoline on the fire.
There
Yep.
you go. And exactly. And multifamily is a fantastic avenue for wealth creation. The difference is in care homes, we just haven't yet gone through that transition. If you read the Cushman and Wakefield produces a report every year or in March, every single report, they say that the senior care segment of multifamily is disproportionately ignored compared to other multifamily, and that it is set to outperform. And it gets, if you take a look at when they first started releasing it in 2022, and you take a look at it every single year until 2025 now, it actually just keeps getting, they keep yelling this
Interesting.
out, invest in this sector. But there's the challenges, I think, are just familiarity. That's why I really appreciate all the time that we can get in order to share the opportunity and the value. But also, some of it is definitely a skill set question as well. So, making sure that you have team members who understand the business and this asset class. For instance, I have a physician who's one of my partners, I have a nursing consultant who's another one of my partners. It's not that you can't get involved as an independent investor. You can, but you need to have some training and some background and some partners growing together. This is much more of a collaborative asset class where we can do this together as a group versus everybody is functioning as an independent small business. And that's how we will democratize care homes so that we can actually start providing the investment required in order to meet the supply.
And I think that explanation kind of stifled what my next objection would be of like, if I don't know anything about this, it sounds too messy compared to traditional multifamily to get into. But what you said, A, education. If somebody feels like something is risky or not worth it, they most likely just don't have enough education in it, 10 times out of 10.
It's
And
true.
then on top of that, if you are getting into this industry, as you said, you can't go in it alone. So maybe if I was trying to handle one of these acquisitions completely on my own, I would be overwhelmed. I would feel it's too messy, it's not worth it, and not have confidence in the deal. But if I did have people with backgrounds that could reflect in this industry and advise me on this, then yeah, I'd probably be set up for success depending on what those kind of advocates I have in my back corner are saying.
Yeah, that's just it too, right? It is a slightly more complicated asset class. There's no question about it, but the opportunities are very substantial. And even with multifamily, I've always said that, and you've probably heard it, would you rather have a grape or a nice chunk of a watermelon? Even investing in multifamily, I believe, is a collaborative sport. And the more that we collaborate and that we learn from each other what works and what doesn't work, we de-risk our business.
Something
And
that just popped into my head, sorry too to cut you off, but I
no,
don't
no,
want to
not at
forget
all.
it, is a lot of landlords I've talked to, and I've speak to so many of them. A lot of them say that like their preferred tenants are seniors, and their logic is they don't really wreck anything. They just
Yeah.
walk in, walk out, sleep, maybe sit on the couch, watch TV. So typically, seniors are very respectful of the physical space that they're in. And the maintenance costs when like the unit turnover eventually happens, units are almost always in very good condition compared to, let's say, teenagers or a young family with kids that are running around. So I think that's another aspect of it too, on the maintenance side of things. Traditionally, seniors are more respectful of the physical space that they're in.
Yes, that's entirely true. And I mean, in these types of like even in traditional multifamily, that will be the case. In monitored facilities, you have the extra added benefit of staff being there 24/7 being part of the model. In a traditional multifamily, you may have a superintendent, but that superintendent isn't there watching over every unit. You might have a superintendent for as many as 200 units. Whereas in care homes, and we're talking about still at the 11, 10, 8 to, let's say 8 to 12% cap rate range, you have a number of, that is including a number of full-time staff, and you're still getting to those figures. So, you have a lot more eyes on your property. You have a lot more engagement with the residents, and it creates a really positive environment as long as you obviously do it correctly. That ensures that your asset is much more secure than something you only have eyes on a smaller percentage of the time.
You were mentioning that there's different kind of tiers to this kind of housing. So does it go retirement, independent living, long term? What I don't know, I'm guessing here. How
No,
does
no,
that
no. It's
work?
a totally a fair question. There are other types of care homes outside of senior care. So, for instance, group homes is one type of asset that I am looking at right now.
And
It
what kind of
provides services.
demographic do group homes help?
In some cases, it provides help to individuals with mental illness. In other cases, it provides help to individuals with special needs. So that might be physical needs. In other cases, it might help individuals who have, let's say, addictions and support, right? Different classes of vulnerable persons. There are also orphanages and facilities that provide care for children are can be run in a group home type style as well. That's something that is more prevalent in the States than is here, but that is another type of group home. On the senior care side, it's the difference is more in independent mobility and a more advanced types of medical conditions that differentiate the levels of senior care. So on the, let's say the group home model, these individuals are mobile, they probably don't have any major diseases. So it's really more about providing food, shelter, make sure that the stability is there. On the senior care side, these are individuals that are absolutely able to take care of themselves up until it becomes a physical need or a medical need. And so at the very base level for senior care, you have typically retirement, which is as much as it's almost like a lifestyle type play, or it's the more attractive retirement living is, the more people make the action to move from their homes into these communities. Because that's a big transition as well. Then after that, it becomes much more need based. When individuals start having trouble with, let's say, getting around or cooking for themselves or going to the store, or it can be even getting out of bed or getting up and off the toilet, which is a very common issue at a certain point, then mobility support is required. And that's where we talk about assisted living. So, retirement progresses to assisted living, where individuals now need more mobility support, some light medical like provisions, depending on if it's something that they're able to generally get around with, where they don't need constant maintenance and monitoring. Then, as needs progress further, and we get into, let's say, sub hospital type care, then it goes to long term care, right? So long term care provides, it's not like hospital level support. It's because hospitals are meant to be temporary anyways. But a lot of the long term care needs of individuals are serviced in long term care. So it could be dialysis, it could be treatment with dementia, it could be any number of things that require more consistent maintenance as opposed to a treatment and a discharge. And yeah, those are, we go from retirement assisted to long-term care is the model.
There's so many different layers to that. And you kind of blend, obviously, with the medical profession as well. If you're helping people with those needs, everybody complains about healthcare in Canada here. So, with the kind of declining, how should I put it, expectation of what healthcare provides you, do you think that this would be a solution to alleviate some of the publicly funded sectors? I know some people think that privatization in the medical field is going to be what collapses the publicly funded medical field, but the flip side is no, we're here to help you and to alleviate the pressure you're on. So, what's your take on that?
Fantastic question. Okay, so the first thing that you should know is that the cost to maintain a bed in a hospital, that can be between $2,000 to $5,000 per day. So us as taxpayers, that's what we pay.
Mm.
The problem is, so hospitals are set up for the maximum level of care. So you have all the equipment, you have very high staff ratios, you have everything that you need in order to be able to take care of people in any situation. And so the problem is that it becomes extremely expensive to service anybody at any level of care in a hospital bed, which is why hospital beds are meant to be temporary. So if there's, let's say, somebody that requires long-term care, it will take up capacity for us to be able to service other things that are needed in the hospital. And so that becomes a much greater challenge when the larger population have longer term care needs and are taking up hospital beds. And my grandfather is a perfect example of this as well. It becomes, for let's say as taxpayers, incredibly expensive, but the real reality of it, like the really sad, like scary reality of it, is that what it actually means is that individuals are admitted to hospital, and then as soon as they are not in urgent state, they're discharged, and then there's no care in between. And I'll give you an example. My grandfather went from, it was urgent, he was in the hospital, and then as soon as he was a little bit better, triage, he's out. And
Yeah.
then there was no support, no other than obviously what my grandmother and family had provided. There isn't a level of consistent professional care in order to be able to maintain things. So the scary scenario is if we do not increase support for long-term care beds, we're essentially eating up all of our budget for hospital beds. And so it becomes much more expensive for the government to pay for hospital beds than it does for long-term care, which is why the government actually incentivizes the development of these facilities. And they're often they provide a large portion of our income. They're incentivized to develop more of these beds, and the government is a partner of these facilities, not competing. We're not disaligned interests. It's
Once again,
cheaper
it's
to
win-win.
pay. Exactly. It's a
Yep.
win-win. It's cheaper to pay for a long-term care bed where the cost is not $2,000 a day, but is maybe a couple hundred a day. The government would much prefer to pay for a long-term care bed at that cost level than for a hospital bed, which is potentially taking up space for somebody that has an urgent care need.
While you were saying this, I was trying to think of a really elementary level summary for it. And this is what I have in my head is hospitals are built and functioning for everybody to have a level 10 medical problem. And then when we have individuals going to the hospitals that maybe only have a 3 or 4 level problem, we as taxpayers are still paying for it as if it's a level 10, like max, right? And then as people go to the hospital for level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, as soon
Yeah.
as the people at the hospital, the medical practitioners bring them back down to level 1 or 2, they're just kicked right out. But they still have a problem. Just because it's not urgent, there is still a chronic problem, and you may have been able to make it a little bit easier, but there's still a problem that people need continuous help with. And if they
Yes.
keep going back, that level 2 turns into a 3, 4. They're back at the hospital. They get patched up, go back to a level 2, then they go up to a 3, 4. We're paying as
Yes.
taxpayers. And even though it was only ever a maximum, let's say in this case, a level 5 problem, the
Yeah.
taxpayers every time are paying for a level 10 price tag.
Yes. You just summarized that perfectly. And the reality of it on the client side as well is that they're not getting the consistent care that they need in order to live a maximally healthy life. And so it does have an impact on their longevity. It has an impact on their quality of life. And yes, because it progresses, it also has an impact on our tax dollars.
Hmm. Wow.
So
This is such a cool conversation. I'm so glad you were able to join me for this. Like
um,
honestly, I was like, oh, I'm psyched for this one. I was telling my husband, well, I'm psyched to talk to Ben. Kind of a last question for you here. If there is someone listening who's interested in entering this space, whether they're an investor or they want to be an employee on one of these buildings that you have, what is step one and what should they avoid early?
step one is plug in, get educated. We have plenty of resources to do so. trying to start up my biweekly mastermind again. It's had to take a bit of a back seat because we've been quite busy, but I'll be sharing out when that comes up again. But we're always open, right? There's a large community that we're growing. We have a Facebook group of other owners and operators of care homes and interested parties.
What is it called
And
if people want to look that up?
no problem. It's care home investors.
Okay.
It's just on Facebook. You can look us up. We're really all just sharing opportunities and experiences. We help each other with underwriting different deals. We help each other with understanding the implications of different policies. It's like the same thing that the community, the multifamily community that helps. And I love this community where we help each other to become better investors, to become better runners of our businesses, and it becomes a very collaborative environment where we share and we help each other. That's what we're growing as well in a care home investors, is a community where people share and they help to elevate each other. And the same way as I would suggest to anybody, whether they're getting into multifamily or into the care home space, is get yourself aligned with people that are interested in providing you value and contribute back as well.
And then if people are wanting to reach out to you directly, how can they do so?
Facebook is usually best, but I will also include my email as well. If you can catch me on a phone call, give it a shot. And if I don't,
What's your
I'm not
email
available.
address?
Yeah, so it's benjamin@chigroup.ca. So just as in back here, we got CHI. So for care home investors group.ca. So
And
Ben, yeah,
I already said one last question, but I'm going to say it again.
no, please.
Who are you looking to connect with? If there's somebody listening that's like, oh, I'm one of those people, I could help Ben. Who are you looking for right now?
Frankly, everybody, this is a wide open field. We need to develop more skill sets. I would say the two things that are right now the immediate bottlenecks are underwriters and capital. So we are right now looking to develop relationships with people who may become down the line an investor, but we don't want to take anybody's money that doesn't fully understand this asset.
Of
So
course.
we're looking to help people along the journey. If they're interested in learning about this segment, we want to talk. It doesn't matter what your particular skill set is right now. This is a wide open space. It's a blue ocean. I don't know if you're familiar with blue ocean strategy.
No, what's that? Blue ocean
It's just
strategy.
instead of competing in spaces where everybody is trying to work, where all of a sudden people are competing for resources or deals or opportunities. If you can get into a space where less people are, where there's still unlimited demand, then you can form more collaborative relationships with people. And so this is one of those spaces where you have the opportunity to grow. We have only the highest incentives for your growth because we need to build our business as well. So yeah, in this case, all hands on deck. We have a massive challenge to reduce the gap in beds by 200,000 over the next decade. And this is going to require a concerted effort from anybody that has a real interest in this space. So if you are interested in this space, get in touch with me, and I'm sure that your passion will find a place for you in this community.
Fantastic. That is officially all of my questions. Thank you so much, Ben, for this. I really found this fascinating and I learned a bunch of stuff myself.
Megan, it's been a pleasure, and I really appreciate your questions. Very good ones, by the way.
Oh,
I didn't
well,
even
thank you.
have to
That's my whole job
write
here.
these down. Yeah, no, this has been a lot of fun, and really looking forward to the next time I get over to Edmonton, and yeah, we can chat further too.
Absolutely. Thank you again for your time, Ben.
All right, you too. Thanks so much, Megan.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you again to Ben for joining me this episode. That was a really stellar conversation. I thoroughly enjoyed that, and I hope you listening did as well. It's something completely different. I've been thinking about this for a long time, but I haven't really educated myself yet. So the universe answered my prayers. I got to learn more about it, and so did you, which is the whole point of this. If you did enjoy this episode, then please like and subscribe. It helps me out a ton. Thank you very much for sharing your time with me. I hope you have a fantastic day. Bye for now.